There is a silent revolution happening right now. Not in the streets or on the news, but in the minds of men and women who have discovered what I am about to share with you. This revolution has always been available to us, yet so few have claimed it. It waits patiently, like a door that appears locked but merely requires the right pressure to swing open. This revolution begins with a simple understanding. Everything in your outer world is a direct reflection of your inner world. Everything you have built, achieved, or failed to achieve began first as a thought. Consider for a moment the room where you sit right now. Before it existed in physical form, it existed as an idea in someone's mind. The chair supporting your weight, the device through which you hear these words, the clothes on your body, all began as thoughts before they materialized into the objects you can touch. This principle extends beyond mere objects to the very circumstances of your life. Your relationships, your financial situation, your health, your position in society, each began as seeds planted in the fertile soil of your consciousness. Most people live their entire lives never realizing this fundamental truth. They believe themselves to be victims of circumstance, products of their environment, or prisoners of their past. They look at successful individuals and attribute their achievements to luck, privilege, or some mysterious force beyond their control. But the successful individual knows better. They understand that the world responds not to their wishes, hopes, or complaints, but to their deepest, most persistent thoughts and beliefs. When Earl Nightingale discovered this principle decades ago, he called it the strangest secret. Strange because it has always been hiding in plain sight, and a secret because so few put it into deliberate practice. The mind is like a garden. Whatever seeds you plant, positive or negative, ambitious or fearful, will eventually grow into the corresponding reality. This is not mysticism or wishful thinking. It is the practical operation of your most powerful faculty, your mind. You see, there exists in each of us a creative mechanism more powerful than any computer ever designed. This mechanism does not judge what we feed it. It simply accepts our thoughts as instructions and works tirelessly to bring them into physical reality. When you understand this, truly understand it, you realize that you have been using this power all along, albeit unconsciously. Those who struggle financially have been dwelling on thoughts of scarcity. Those who find themselves repeatedly in destructive relationships have been harboring beliefs about their unworthiness. And those who succeed spectacularly in any area of life have been thinking thoughts of abundance, capability, and worthiness. The mental shift I am describing is not merely positive thinking. It is not about affirmations repeated without conviction or visualizations performed without feeling. It is about fundamentally altering your relationship with thought itself, recognizing that your thoughts are not passive observers of reality, but active creators of it. This shift requires you to assume total responsibility for the content of your mind, treating each thought as a seed that will inevitably bear fruit. Consider the case of Henry Ford, who conceived of mass automobile production long before the technology existed to make it feasible. When engineers told him his vision for the V8 engine was impossible, he simply instructed them to produce it anyway. He held the thought with such conviction that eventually, reality bent to accommodate his vision. The engineers, constrained by their limiting beliefs, could not see the path forward. Ford, empowered by his expansive thinking, could see nothing else. Or consider Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before successfully creating the electric light bulb. When asked about his numerous failures, he famously remarked that he had not failed at all. He had successfully discovered thousands of ways that would not work. His mind was fixed not on the obstacles but on the outcome. The current reality of failure did not deter him because in his mind, success was the only possible conclusion. His thoughts were firmly planted in eventual triumph, and so triumph became inevitable. What separates these pioneers from the average person is not intelligence, resources, or opportunity. It is their relationship with thought. They understood, perhaps intuitively, that thought precedes all creation. Nothing in human civilization exists that did not first exist as an idea. And if this is true of our collective creations, how much more true must it be of our individual lives? Now, you might be wondering how this applies to you, in your specific circumstances. Perhaps you face seemingly insurmountable challenges. Perhaps you have tried and failed repeatedly to improve your situation. Perhaps you have even attempted to change your thinking in the past, only to slide back into familiar patterns of thought and, consequently, familiar results. The key insight is this: most attempts at changing our thinking are superficial. We try to plaster positive thoughts over a foundation of limiting beliefs. We attempt to think about success while deeply believing we are destined for failure. We affirm abundance while clutching tightly to our fear of scarcity. This conflict, this contradiction between surface thoughts and core beliefs, is what prevents the mental shift from taking hold. The transformation I am describing requires alignment between your conscious thoughts and your subconscious beliefs. It requires excavating the mental foundations upon which your life has been built and reconstructing them according to the blueprint you wish to follow. This is not work to be taken lightly. It demands rigorous self-examination, intellectual honesty, and persistent effort. But the rewards are beyond calculation. Imagine for a moment that you could install a new operating system in your mind, one designed specifically for success, fulfillment, and growth. What would change in your life if your automatic thoughts aligned perfectly with your highest aspirations? How would you approach challenges differently? How would others respond to you? How would opportunities seemingly begin to appear where before there were only obstacles? The mental shift begins with awareness. You must become conscious of your current thought patterns before you can change them. Pay attention to the running commentary in your mind as you move through your day. Notice the assumptions you make, the limitations you accept, the possibilities you dismiss. Listen to the language you use when speaking to yourself and others. Are your words infused with conviction and capability, or doubt and resignation? Most people are shocked when they first become truly aware of their inner dialogue. They discover a harsh critic that has been undermining their efforts from within. They uncover beliefs about money, success, relationships, and self-worth that were installed decades ago, often in childhood, and have been operating unchallenged ever since. These beliefs form the invisible architecture of their lives, the unseen foundations upon which all else is built. The awareness itself is transformative. Simply by noticing these patterns, you begin to loosen their grip. The thoughts that have been controlling you from behind the scenes are suddenly exposed to the light of consciousness. They can no longer operate with the same autonomy, but awareness alone is not enough. You must actively replace limiting thoughts with expansive ones, not as a mental trick or temporary boost, but as a fundamental restructuring of your relationship with reality. When Abraham Lincoln said, "Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be," he was touching on this very principle. Happiness, like success, is not primarily determined by external circumstances, but by internal decisions. The person who has decided to be happy will find reasons for joy even in difficult situations. The person who has decided to succeed will find paths forward even when faced with setbacks. These are not emotional reactions but cognitive choices, decisions made at the level of thought that then filter down to influence every aspect of experience. Consider the striking difference between two individuals facing identical circumstances. One sees problems, threats, and reasons to retreat. The other sees challenges, opportunities, and invitations to advance. The external reality is the same. The internal reality, the thought patterns, beliefs, and mental frameworks, could not be more different. And it is this difference, more than any external factor, that determines their divergent outcomes. The mind is like water. It takes the shape of whatever container holds it. If your container is built from thoughts of limitation, scarcity, and self-doubt, your experiences will conform to these contours. If, however, you consciously reshape your container using thoughts of possibility, abundance, and self-efficacy, your life will expand accordingly. This is not wishful thinking but practical psychology, not mysticism but the mechanics of human consciousness. Now let us explore this mental shift more concretely. What precisely does it entail? At its core, it involves replacing reaction with creation. Most people live reactively. They respond to circumstances as they arise, allowing external events to determine their internal state. They are like leaves in the wind, carried wherever the currents of life happen to blow. The mentally shifted individual lives creatively. They respond to circumstances with intention, using external events as raw material for their predetermined internal state. They are like ships with rudders, capable of navigating even adverse winds toward their chosen destination. This distinction cannot be overstated. The reactive individual asks, "What is happening to me?" The creative individual asks, "What am I causing to happen?" The reactive mind sees itself as an effect. The creative mind knows itself to be a cause. And this simple reversal of perspective, this mental shift from effect to cause, changes everything. When you truly internalize your role as cause rather than effect, you approach problems differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What am I meant to learn from this?" Or, "How can I use this situation to my advantage?" Instead of saying, "I can't because," you ask, "How can I?" Instead of focusing on what you lack, you inventory what you have and leverage it fully. This is not positive thinking for its own sake. It is strategic thinking that leads to positive outcomes. Consider how this mental shift would transform your approach to failure. The average person sees failure as evidence of their limitations. The mentally shifted individual sees it as feedback on their current strategy. The average person takes failure personally. The mentally shifted individual takes it instructively. One shrinks in the face of setbacks, the other grows. One avoids risks to prevent failure. The other embraces calculated risks as the price of growth. Or consider how this mental shift would transform your relationship with time. The average person sees time as something that happens to them, a resource that is constantly diminishing. The mentally shifted individual sees time as something they direct and invest, a dimension they actively shape rather than passively experience. One is perpetually busy yet accomplishes little of significance. The other is purposefully engaged and creates enduring value. This shift in thinking about time is particularly important in our age of endless distraction. When you recognize yourself as cause rather than effect, you take full responsibility for how you allocate your attention. You understand that what you consistently focus on expands in your life. If you focus on problems, you become an expert in problems. If you focus on solutions, you become a generator of solutions. If you focus on what's wrong with the world, you become a critic. If you focus on what you can improve, you become a creator. The mentally shifted individual guards their attention as their most precious resource. They recognize that the mind, like any tool, becomes more effective with proper use and maintenance. They cultivate periods of deep focus and reflection. They consume information selectively rather than reactively. They regularly disconnect from the noise of the world to connect with the wisdom of their own thoughts. This is not isolation, but intentional engagement, not withdrawal from reality, but deeper participation in its creation. Now, you might be thinking that this mental shift sounds appealing, but wonder if it's truly accessible to you. Perhaps you believe that some people are naturally positive thinkers while others are naturally negative. Perhaps you've tried to change your thinking in the past only to slip back into familiar patterns. Perhaps you doubt whether thinking alone can really transform your circumstances, especially if those circumstances involve genuine hardship or disadvantage. These concerns are valid, but rest on a misunderstanding. The mental shift I am describing is not about forcing yourself to think positively regardless of evidence. It is about recognizing that evidence itself is interpreted through the lens of your existing beliefs. Two people can look at the same situation and see entirely different implications based on their mental framework. The shift is about consciously choosing the framework through which you interpret reality, knowing that this choice will then influence the reality you experience. As for whether some people are naturally disposed to certain thought patterns, this is undoubtedly true. We each have temperamental tendencies and ingrained habits of mind, but these tendencies and habits are not fixed. The human brain exhibits remarkable plasticity throughout life. New neural pathways can be formed at any age through consistent practice. Old patterns of thought can be weakened through disuse. The brain you have today is not the brain you're condemned to have tomorrow. It is being reshaped continuously by your choices, including your choice of what to think. And regarding the power of thought to change circumstances, we must be clear. Thinking alone, divorced from action, accomplishes little, but thinking precedes and directs effective action. The quality of your actions depends on the quality of your thoughts. Muddled thinking leads to muddled action. Clear, directed thinking leads to clear, directed action. The individual who has made the mental shift we're discussing doesn't merely think differently, they behave differently as a result of their thinking. And it is this behavior, guided by transformed thought, that alters their circumstances. Consider the realm of purpose. The average person drifts through life without a clearly defined purpose, taking whatever opportunities present themselves, following paths of least resistance. The mentally shifted individual has reverse-engineered their life from a compelling vision of what they want to create or contribute. One is like a rudderless boat, carried by prevailing currents. The other is like a vessel with precise navigation, able to adapt to changing conditions while maintaining its course. This sense of purpose doesn't typically arrive in a single moment of revelation. It evolves through action, reflection, and adjustment. But it begins with the mental shift from reactive to creative living, from seeing yourself as a product of circumstances to seeing yourself as a creator of circumstances. When you make this shift, you start asking different questions. What problems am I uniquely positioned to solve? What contribution can I make that aligns with my values and strengths? What would I do even if no one paid me to do it? What makes me lose track of time when I'm engaged in it? These questions lead to discoveries about yourself and your relationship to the world. They reveal pathways of meaning that were previously invisible, and from these revelations emerges a sense of purpose that acts as both compass and engine, directing your efforts and energizing them simultaneously. With purpose comes responsibility, not as a burden, but as a natural expression of your capacity to respond to life's challenges and opportunities. The mentally shifted individual embraces this responsibility fully. They do not blame circumstances, other people, or the system for their situation. Even when facing genuine obstacles or injustices, they focus on what they can control rather than what they cannot. They recognize that while they may not be responsible for every circumstance they face, they are always responsible for their response to those circumstances. This acceptance of responsibility is profoundly liberating. When you stop blaming external factors for your situation, you reclaim the power to change it. When you stop waiting for conditions to improve before taking action, you create the conditions for improvement through your action. This is not naive optimism, but pragmatic realism, an acknowledgement that the most direct path to changing your circumstances is to change yourself first. The mentally shifted individual applies this principle of responsibility to all areas of life. In relationships, they focus on what they can give, rather than what they can get. In work, they concentrate on the value they can create rather than the reward they feel entitled to receive. In personal development, they emphasize growth over comfort, learning over being right, progress over perfection. This orientation toward giving, creating, and growing, rather than taking, consuming, and maintaining, generates momentum that carries them through difficulties that would stop others entirely. Decision becomes a natural extension of this responsibility. The average person avoids decisions or makes them based primarily on convenience, comfort, or convention. The mentally shifted individual makes decisions based on alignment with their purpose, values, and vision. One is perpetually reactive, buffeted by the opinions and expectations of others. The other is internally directed, guided by principles that transcend temporary circumstances. This capacity for decisive action rests on a foundation of clear thinking. When your thoughts are aligned with your deepest values and highest aspirations, decisions that seem difficult to others become obvious to you. The noise of competing options is replaced by the clear signal of what matters most. And with this clarity comes the courage to act even when the path forward involves risk or temporary discomfort. Persistence naturally follows from this combination of purpose, responsibility, and decisive action. The mentally shifted individual doesn't need external motivation to continue in the face of obstacles. Their drive comes from within, from their unshakable belief in the value of what they're creating, and their certainty that temporary setbacks are not permanent defeats, but necessary steps toward mastery. This persistence is not stubborn adherence to a failing strategy. It is flexible commitment to an ultimate outcome. When one approach doesn't work, the mentally shifted individual tries another and another, learning and adapting with each attempt. They understand that failure is not falling short but falling down and refusing to get up. As long as they keep rising, learning, and adjusting their course based on feedback, they cannot truly fail. Learning becomes a way of life for such individuals. They don't see education as something that ends with formal schooling, but as a lifelong process of growth and discovery. They are perpetually curious, constantly expanding their understanding of themselves and the world. They seek wisdom from all sources: books, experiences, mentors, even their own mistakes. They recognize that in a rapidly changing world, the capacity to learn continuously is perhaps the most valuable skill of all. This commitment to learning isn't motivated by insecurity or the fear of falling behind. It springs from genuine curiosity and the pleasure of mastery. The mentally shifted individual doesn't learn to prove themselves to others, but to express themselves more fully. They don't acquire knowledge as a status symbol, but as a tool for more effective action and deeper understanding. Action is where all these elements, purpose, responsibility, decision, persistence, and learning, converge. The mentally shifted individual understands that thought without action is mere fantasy, while action without thought is mere reaction. They bring these complementary forces into alignment, thinking clearly about what they want to create and then acting decisively to bring it into being. This action is not frenetic busyness or movement for its own sake. It is directed effort toward meaningful outcomes. It is guided by vision yet responsive to feedback. It is ambitious yet grounded in reality. It stretches capacity without breaking it. And it is consistent, repeated day after day regardless of mood or circumstance, until incremental efforts compound into transformative results. Direction emerges naturally from this consistent, purposeful action. The mentally shifted individual may not always know every step of their journey in advance, but they maintain a clear sense of their overall trajectory. They understand that success is rarely linear, that the path to any worthwhile achievement involves detours, unexpected challenges, and surprising opportunities. But through it all, they maintain their orientation toward what matters most to them. This sense of direction is both internal and external. Internally, it manifests as a coherent narrative that gives meaning to their experiences, connecting past, present, and future in a way that makes sense. Externally, it appears as steady progress toward meaningful goals, even when that progress involves temporary setbacks or periods of apparent stagnation. And finally, we arrive at destiny, not as some predetermined fate, but as the natural culmination of thought patterns consistently held and actions consistently taken. The mentally shifted individual understands that they are not merely discovering their destiny, but actively creating it through each choice, each focus of attention, each commitment, made and kept. Their destiny is not something that happens to them, but something they participate in bringing about. This view of destiny is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it acknowledges that we are shaped by forces larger than ourselves, by the cultures we inhabit, the times in which we live, the people we encounter along the way. Empowering because it recognizes that within these contexts, we have the capacity to chart our own course, to make meaning from circumstance, to leave our unique imprint on the world. The mental shift I have described, from reactive to creative thinking, from seeing yourself as effect to recognizing yourself as cause, transforms not only your external circumstances but your internal experience of life. It replaces anxiety with purpose, confusion with clarity, resignation with resolve. It doesn't guarantee freedom from difficulties. No authentic philosophy of life can promise that. But it ensures that difficulties serve your growth rather than diminish your spirit. This shift is available to anyone willing to undertake the work of conscious transformation. It requires vigilance over your thoughts, patience with your progress, and compassion for your inevitable lapses into old patterns. But with persistence, what begins as deliberate effort becomes natural inclination. The new thinking becomes your default setting, rather than something you must constantly monitor and maintain. And as your thinking changes, so does your life. Not instantly, but inevitably. The seeds you plant today in the garden of your mind will grow into the reality you experience tomorrow. This is not mysticism, but the practical operation of cause and effect in human psychology and behavior. What you consistently think about, you move toward. What you consistently believe, you become. So I leave you with this question. What thoughts are you planting today that will grow into your future reality? Are they thoughts of limitation or possibility? Of scarcity or abundance? Of fear or faith in your capacity to create the life you truly desire? The answer to these questions will determine the course of your life more surely than any external circumstance. For in the end, it is not what happens to you, but what happens within you that shapes your destiny. And what happens within you begins with the thoughts you choose to think. This one mental shift, from seeing yourself as a passive recipient of life to recognizing yourself as its active creator, truly can transform your entire life's direction. It has done so for countless individuals throughout history. It can do the same for you starting today, with the very next thought you choose to think.